If they find me before sunrise, promise me you will forget my face." Claire Bennett stopped with one hand wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug, certain she had misunderstood the stranger sitting across from her. Rain hammered the windows of the roadside in so hard that the pine trees beyond the glass appeared and vanished behind silver sheets of water. Thunder rolled somewhere over the mountains, rattling the old window frames. The man had introduced himself only as Ethan. Nothing more. He looked about 30, with dark hair still damp from the storm, silver-gray eyes that seemed too alert for someone claiming to be exhausted, and a black coat, far finer than anything a stranded traveler should have been wearing at an inn 15 miles from the nearest town. Claire slowly set the mug beside him. "That is a strange thing to ask someone you met 20 minutes ago." Ethan looked toward the window. "It has been a strange night." Claire almost laughed, but the sound never came. Strange did not begin to describe her night. At 22, she had managed to fit everything she owned into one faded suitcase. 3 sweaters, 2 pairs of jeans, a photograph of her mother, $78 in cash. That was all Raven Creek Pack had allowed her to carry into whatever came next. She had spent years making herself useful enough to overlook and quiet enough not to inconvenience anyone. It had never been enough. Omega. The word should have meant belonging. At Raven Creek, it had become another way to remind Claire where she stood. Her wolf had barely stirred since adolescence, leaving her unable to shift like the others, and giving the pack one more reason to treat her as something unfinished. That afternoon, when Claire walked through Raven Creek's gates for the final time, nobody followed. Nobody asked her to stay. She had driven west until the storm turned the highway into a blur, and a fallen tree forced her toward this forgotten little inn. She had planned to sleep, wait for daylight, and continue toward somewhere nobody knew her name. Then Ethan had walked through the door. Claire studied him now. He sat near the stone fireplace, one hand resting loosely beside the untouched coffee she had brought him. He appeared calm, but his attention kept moving toward the entrance whenever footsteps crossed the lobby. "Who exactly are you expecting?" she asked. "People who believe I should be somewhere else." "Family." Something almost amused passed through his eyes. In a manner of speaking, Claire folded her arms. "That is not an answer. It is the safest one." She should have walked away. Instead, something beneath her ribs stirred. Claire went still. Her wolf. For years, that presence had felt like a candle burning at the bottom of a deep well, faint enough that sometimes she wondered whether she imagined it. Now it lifted its head inside her with unmistakable awareness. Toward him, Ethan's gaze snapped to Claire's face. The speed of his reaction unsettled her. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. You looked at me like something happened." "Did something happen?" Claire tightened her fingers around the sleeve of her coat. "No." His eyes remained on hers for another second before he deliberately looked away. He knew. Somehow he knew. Outside, a distant howl traveled through the storm. Ethan became perfectly still. Another answered from farther down the mountain. Claire felt her wolf awaken even more strongly, but there was no fear in it. Only recognition she could not understand. Ethan stood and crossed toward the window. The tired traveler disappeared from his posture. His shoulders straightened. His movements became controlled and certain, like a man accustomed to entering rooms where everyone else waited for him to decide what happened next. "Are those the people looking for you?" Claire whispered. "Yes." "Should I be worried?" Ethan turned. Firelight caught his silver-gray eyes. "Not about me." The answer should have frightened her. Instead, Claire believed him, and that frightened her more. He stepped away from the window, stopping several feet from her. "The road should reopen by morning. When it does, you should leave and keep going." Claire stared at him. "You do not even know where I am going." "Neither do you." Her breath caught. He had noticed too much. Ethan's expression softened, just slightly. "You have spent the entire evening holding that suitcase close enough to grab it without standing up. Whatever you left behind, you do not plan on returning." Claire looked toward the battered suitcase beside her chair. Maybe there is nothing to return to. Silence settled between them. Rain struck the roof. The fireplace cracked softly. Ethan looked at her not with pity, but with something far more dangerous to a woman who had spent years being invisible. Understanding. "Then tonight," he said quietly, "you do not have to be who they told you to be." Claire's wolf surged toward his voice. She forgot the storm, forgot Raven Creek, forgot that she should not trust a stranger who refused to give her his last name. "And who are you tonight?" she asked. Ethan held her gaze while another distant howl rolled across the mountain. Just Ethan. Claire did not know that men lowered their eyes when he passed. She did not know that the crest hidden beneath his coat belonged to the most powerful bloodline in the Northern Territories. She knew only that, for the first time in years, her wolf was awake. And somehow, it had awakened for him. Claire had spent so many years apologizing for taking up space that she did it without noticing. Sorry, she murmured when she reached across the small table for the sugar bowl. Ethan looked at her hand, then at her face. For what? Claire paused. I was reaching across you. You were reaching for sugar. Exactly. That does not usually require an apology. A faint warmth touched her cheeks. She stirred a spoonful into her coffee and concentrated on the dark surface as though it might rescue her from the conversation. Ethan did not laugh at her. That somehow made the moment harder. At Raven Creek, people had noticed everything she did wrong and almost nothing she did right. She had learned to move quietly through kitchens, hallways, and crowded rooms. If someone bumped into her, Claire apologized. If someone interrupted her, Claire apologized. If she needed help carrying something heavy, she usually decided she did not need help after all. Small habits. Harmless habits. Until a stranger noticed them within an hour. You do that often, Ethan said. Do what? Say you are sorry before anyone has accused you of anything. Claire lifted her eyes. You pay too much attention. Occupational habit. What occupation? Ethan took a slow drink of coffee. The complicated kind. Despite herself, Claire smiled. You are terrible at answering questions. I have been told that before. By your family? His expression shifted, not enough to reveal anything, but enough for Claire to understand she had touched something guarded. By people who expect answers from me. She leaned back in her chair. That sounds exhausting. It can be. Then maybe you should stop being important. Ethan looked at her for a second, and a quiet laugh escaped him. The sound surprised Claire. It seemed to surprise him too. Outside, rain continued washing over the highway, but the thunder had moved farther into the mountains. The innkeeper appeared from the hallway carrying an old brass lantern. He told them the power company expected another outage and that the road crew would not clear the fallen tree until daylight. Claire thanked him. Ethan merely nodded. The innkeeper immediately straightened, almost as though that small acknowledgement carried unusual weight, then disappeared behind the front desk. Claire watched him go. He acts strange around you. Maybe he dislikes my coffee order. Black coffee is not intimidating. You have not tasted his coffee. Claire laughed again. This time it came easily. Her wolf stirred beneath the sound, warm and unexpectedly content. Ethan's gaze sharpened for the briefest moment. Claire caught it. There, she said. You did it again. Did what? You noticed. Silence. Claire lowered her voice. My wolf. Ethan set his mug down carefully. I noticed something changed. Most people cannot sense her at all. Her. My wolf. Claire immediately regretted saying so much. She looked toward the fire. She has always been quiet. Ethan waited instead of filling the silence. That was another thing she was not used to. Everyone at Raven Creek shifted before I did. Claire continued. Then they stopped waiting for me. Her fingers tightened around the mug. Eventually, I stopped waiting too. Ethan's expression remained calm, but something colder appeared behind his eyes. Not directed at her. And they decided that made you less valuable. Claire gave a small shrug. Nobody said it exactly like that. They did not need to. She looked at him. The certainty in his voice unsettled her because it sounded like understanding rather than sympathy. You really do notice too much. People reveal more through what they accept than what they say. Claire thought about Raven Creek's gates closing behind her. About the envelope containing her remaining wages. About the silence when she carried her suitcase away. They said I would be happier somewhere better suited to someone like me. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Someone like you. An omega who cannot shift. That is what they see. What do you see? The question escaped before Claire could stop it. Ethan did not answer immediately. Firelight moved across his face while rain whispered against the windows. Someone who drove into a mountain storm rather than stay where she was unwanted. Claire's breath caught. That sounds reckless. Sometimes courage does. Nobody had ever described her leaving Raven Creek as courage. Claire looked down before he could see how deeply the words landed. A howl sounded again in the distance, softer now. Ethan turned toward the window. Claire's wolf rose instantly, no longer faint, no longer sleeping. Ethan slowly looked back at her. For one impossible heartbeat, something answered from behind his silver-gray eyes. Claire felt it before she understood it. Power. Vast, controlled, carefully hidden. Her wolf did not shrink from it. She moved closer inside Claire, almost curious. "Ethan," Claire whispered, "what are you?" His face became still. Then the lights above them flickered once and went dark, leaving only the fireplace between them. In the sudden shadows, Ethan's voice came quietly. "Tonight, Claire, I am someone who understands exactly what it means to want one night without a name." The darkness should have made Ethan less intimidating. Instead, Claire became more aware of him. The fireplace threw slow amber light across the room, catching the sharp line of his face before shadows. Claimed it again. Somewhere behind the front desk, the innkeeper muttered about finding more lanterns. Rain softened against the windows, but Claire barely heard it. Her wolf was awake. Truly awake. Not the weak flicker she had learned to accept, but a warm presence pressing beneath her ribs as though years of silence had ended in a single night. And every instinct inside her pointed toward Ethan. "You avoided my question," Claire said. He remained beside the window. "I know. That is becoming another occupational habit." A faint smile touched his mouth. Probably. Claire should have let it go. By morning, she intended to be 50 miles away, maybe farther. Whatever secrets Ethan carried belonged to a life she would never enter. Yet her wolf refused to accept that simple explanation. When those howls started, you knew exactly what they meant. Ethan's expression became guarded. "Yes. And when my wolf reacted, you knew that too." "Yes." At least he had stopped pretending. Claire folded her arms. "So tell me something true." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "I am a wolf." Claire almost laughed. That was not exactly difficult to guess. "You asked for something true, not something surprising." "Fine. Something surprising." He stepped away from the window. "I hate formal dinners." Claire blinked. "What?" "They last too long. Everyone pretends to enjoy them, and nobody says what they actually think." She stared at him before a laugh escaped her. "That is your surprising truth." "You seem tense." "You are impossible." "I have also been told that." The innkeeper entered carrying 2 lanterns and placed one near the stairs. "Only one room left that is not leaking," he explained. "Roof took on more water than expected. It has a bed and a chair by the fireplace. You two can decide who gets what." Claire opened her mouth to object, but Ethan spoke first. "She gets the room. I can stay here." The innkeeper shook his head. "Lobby fireplace is being shut down before I turn in. Insurance rules." Ethan looked as though he had just encountered an opponent more stubborn than himself. Claire hid a smile. "I can take the chair," she said. "No." The word came too quickly, too naturally. Claire raised an eyebrow. Ethan seemed to catch himself. "You have been driving all day. Take the bed. I will use the chair." Was that a command? A suggestion? It sounded suspiciously like a command. "Then I need more practice making suggestions." They followed the innkeeper upstairs. Claire carried her suitcase herself even when Ethan reached for it. He noticed her refusal but did not insist. The room was small and old-fashioned, with a queen-size bed, a worn armchair, and a narrow window overlooking the dark forest. Ethan checked the window latch almost immediately. Then the hallway. Then the second-floor fire escape. Claire watched him. "You always inspect every exit?" He stopped. "Usually. Because of your complicated occupation? Because being careless can affect more than me." That answer carried weight. Claire sat on the edge of the bed, leaving her suitcase beside her feet. "You said you wanted one night without a name." Ethan leaned against the wall opposite her. "I did. What would you do with it?" The question seemed to surprise him. For once, he did not have an immediate answer. "Sleep," he said finally. Claire smiled. "That is terribly ambitious." "You?" She looked toward the rain sliding down the glass. "I would wake up somewhere nobody had already decided who I was." Ethan's expression softened. "And then?" "Find work. Rent something small. Maybe near a town where people mind their own business." "Sounds peaceful." "I have never had peaceful." Her voice became quieter. "I think I would like to try it." Ethan crossed to the chair, but did not sit. "You should." Claire looked at him. "You say that like people can simply choose another life." "Sometimes they can." "Can you?" Silence answered first. Ethan turned toward the window. "No." That single word told Claire more than anything else he had said. Whoever Ethan was, his secrets were not merely something he carried. They owned part of him. Claire's wolf stirred again, stronger when sadness crossed his face. Without thinking, she stepped closer. Ethan noticed immediately. His breathing changed, barely enough to see. Claire stopped several feet away. There, she whispered. What? Whatever is inside you reacted to. His silver-gray eyes sharpened. Claire, my wolf recognizes something. Ethan said nothing. Does yours recognize me? The room seemed to hold its breath. Rain tapped gently against the window. Ethan's control slipped for only a heartbeat, but it was enough. Something ancient and powerful moved behind his eyes. Claire's wolf surged forward with such certainty that her hand flew to her chest. Ethan took one careful step backward, not toward her. Away. You should not be able to feel me this strongly, he said. Claire swallowed. Why? His gaze moved toward the door, then back to her. Because I have spent most of my life learning how to make sure nobody can. For several seconds, Claire could hear nothing but the rain and her own heartbeat. Ethan remained near the window, his careful distance telling her more than another secret ever could. Whatever connection had awakened between them, he felt it too. He was simply better at hiding it. You are afraid of me sensing you, Claire said. Ethan's eyes returned to hers. I am cautious about anyone sensing me. That is not the same thing. No. Claire waited, but he offered nothing more. She should have been frustrated. Instead, she understood something she had missed downstairs. Ethan was not protecting himself from her. He was protecting the boundary around whatever life waited for him beyond this room. She knew something about boundaries. Raven Creek had drawn them around her for years. Not here. Not with us. Not enough. Claire moved back toward the bed and sat down, giving Ethan the space he seemed to need. All right. His brow tightened slightly. All right. You do not have to tell me. You were asking 30 seconds ago, and you clearly do not want to answer. Claire looked at her hands. I know what it feels like when people believe they are entitled to parts of you. Silence followed. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice had softened. Thank you. Claire glanced up. Do not make me regret being reasonable. A quiet smile appeared. I will try. The tension eased, not disappearing but changing shape. Ethan settled into the armchair while Claire leaned against the headboard, both still fully dressed, the room warmed by the small fireplace. Minutes became an hour. Neither seemed ready to sleep. They talked instead. Claire told him she wanted to live near a town with a farmer's market and a library large enough to get lost in. She wanted work that mattered without requiring anyone's approval. Maybe herbs, she said. Her mother had taught her the names of wild plants when she was young, and Claire still remembered how lavender could soften a restless evening and peppermint could make a cramped kitchen smell like summer. Ethan listened as though these ordinary dreams were important. What about you? She asked. If nobody expected anything from you tomorrow, what would you choose? Ethan looked into the fire. A cabin. Claire smiled. A cabin. Somewhere quiet. Mountains behind it. A lake close enough to walk to. No formal dinners? Absolutely none. Black coffee. Every morning. Terrible black coffee. That depends on who makes it. Claire laughed. And what would you do all day? Ethan considered the question with surprising seriousness. Repair things. Read. Walk somewhere without anyone following me. The last words changed the mood. Claire thought of the howls outside. People always follow you. Usually. That sounds lonely. Ethan's gaze lifted. Something unguarded appeared there. It is. Claire knew that loneliness. Hers had simply worn different clothes. She had been surrounded by a pack and still felt invisible. Ethan seemed surrounded by people who watched everything he did and somehow remained equally alone. Maybe that is why we ended up here, she said. A broken highway. Two people hiding from everyone who thinks they know them. Ethan's expression softened. Maybe. Another hour passed. The storm weakened until rain became a gentle rhythm against the roof. Claire's wolf remained awake, no longer restless. It felt peaceful near Ethan, which made no sense and yet required no explanation. When Claire shivered, Ethan quietly offered his coat. She accepted without apologizing. He noticed. Progress, he said. Do not get used to it. She pulled the coat around her shoulders. Pine, cold air, and something unmistakably has surrounded her. Her wolf settled immediately. Ethan watched the reaction, and this time neither pretended it had not happened. Whatever this is, Claire whispered, I do not want to be afraid of it tonight. Ethan stood slowly. Neither do I. He stopped close enough for Claire to see the uncertainty beneath his control. A man who seemed capable of commanding any room was waiting for her to decide what happened in this one. Claire reached for his hand. Nothing dramatic happened. No thunder. No sudden magic. Only warmth, and the quiet certainty of two lonely people choosing trust for a few borrowed hours. Ethan's fingers closed gently around hers. Claire leaned her head against his shoulder, and he remained still until she relaxed. They spoke more softly after that, sharing memories they had never intended to give a stranger. Sometime before dawn, words finally ran out. Ethan brushed a loose strand of hair from Claire's face and paused, giving her every chance to move away. She did not. Their foreheads touched, and Claire closed her eyes. Whatever tenderness followed belonged only to them, private and unhurried, while the last of the storm moved beyond the mountains. Later, Claire fell asleep beneath the quilt with Ethan's coat nearby and the unfamiliar comfort of not feeling unwanted. Just before sleep claimed her, she heard Ethan whisper her name as though he was trying to memorize it. Claire wanted to ask whether he would still be there when morning came. She did not. For once, she allowed herself to believe he would be. Claire woke to a room that felt wrong before she understood why. The rain had stopped. Pale morning light slipped through the narrow window, touching the old wooden floor, the quiet fireplace, and the empty armchair beside it. Ethan was gone. Claire remained beneath the quilt for several seconds, listening. No footsteps crossed the hallway. No low voice spoke downstairs. No familiar presence stirred her wolf. Ethan. Silence answered. She sat up slowly. His coat was gone. So were his boots and the small travel bag he had placed beside the chair. The room had been left almost perfectly neat, as though someone had carefully erased every sign that another person had spent the night there. Claire's chest tightened. She told herself there could be a reasonable explanation. Maybe he had gone downstairs for coffee. Maybe the people searching for him had returned. Maybe he had stepped outside to check whether the highway was open. Then she saw the folded piece of paper on the bedside table. Something heavy rested on top of it. Claire reached for the object first. It was a silver signet ring, cool against her palm, engraved with a black wolf beneath a crescent moon. The craftsmanship was finer than anything she had ever owned. Tiny markings circled the edge, too intricate for her to understand. She turned it once between her fingers, then unfolded the note. For words waited beneath a single sentence. Morning changes everything. Do not look for me. Claire read it again. The words did not change. Her wolf, so awake only hours earlier, withdrew into silence. Of course, Claire whispered. She had known him for one night. One storm. One collection of half-answers she had mistaken for honesty because his eyes had looked lonely when he gave them. She had promised herself she would stop measuring her worth by whether someone chose to stay. Yet standing in that quiet room, Claire felt 22 years of rejection gather around those few words. She folded the note carefully because tearing it would have meant admitting it mattered. Downstairs, the innkeeper was pouring coffee when she approached. The road crew cleared the highway about 30 minutes ago, he said. Claire placed her suitcase beside her feet. Did Ethan leave? The man's hand paused over the coffee pot. Your friend? Yes. Early. Was he alone? The innkeeper looked toward the front windows. The hesitation lasted only a second, but Claire noticed. I could not say. Could not or will not. His expression closed. I am sorry, miss. Claire almost apologized for asking. She caught herself. Progress, Ethan had called it. The memory hurt more than it should have. Thank you for the room, she said instead. By 8 o'clock, Claire was driving west beneath a sky washed clean by the storm. The mountains gradually disappeared behind her. She kept the ring and note inside the glove compartment, telling herself she would throw them away at the next gas station. She never did. Weeks passed. Claire reached Cedar Falls, a quiet mountain town with brick storefronts, a public library, and a Saturday farmer's market exactly like the kind she had described to Ethan. She rented a small room above a bakery and found work helping an elderly herbalist named Margaret Hale. For the first time, nobody asked what rank she held before deciding whether she deserved kindness. Claire began to breathe differently there. Then one October morning, the smell of coffee turned her stomach. She blamed nerves. 2 days later, she blamed exhaustion. A week after that, she sat inside a small medical clinic while a nurse spoke gently and placed a printed result in her hands. Claire stared at the words until they blurred. She was pregnant. Her first thought was of silver gray eyes beside a dying fire. Her second was the note. Do not look for me. That evening, Claire sat beside the apartment window with the signet ring resting on the table. Fear arrived in practical questions. Rent, work, childcare, money, family. She had none of the last one left that she trusted. Her hand settled over her stomach even though there was nothing to feel yet. I do not know how to do this, she whispered. Deep inside her, the wolf Raven Creek had dismissed as weak stirred again. Not toward Ethan this time. Toward the new life Claire carried. Warm, protective, certain. Claire closed her eyes. For years, everyone had told her what she lacked. Rank, strength, a proper wolf, a place worth keeping. But this child would never learn love as something that had to be earned. All right, she whispered. Then it is you and me. Months later, Claire held a healthy baby boy against her chest while morning sunlight filled the hospital room. She named him Lucas Bennett. When his eyes finally opened clearly, Claire forgot how to breathe. Silver gray, Ethan's eyes. She kissed her son's forehead and held him closer. Whatever his father had been running from, whatever the signet ring truly meant, Claire would not chase a man who had asked to be forgotten. She would build something of her own. What she did not yet understand was that the note in her keepsake box contained the first lie of a secret that would take 7 years to uncover. 7 years later, Lucas Bennett could hear the bakery timer from half a block away. Claire discovered this on a Tuesday morning when her son stopped beside the front window of the herbal shop and announced that Mrs. Hale had forgotten her blueberry muffins again. 3 seconds later, a faint bell sounded from the bakery down Main Street. Claire looked at him over a bundle of dried lavender. How did you hear that? Lucas shrugged and continued tying his sneakers. It is loud. It was not loud. Claire could barely hear it with the shop door open. At 7, Lucas had become a collection of small mysteries she had learned not to fear. He could identify people approaching their apartment before footsteps reached the stairs. He noticed deer moving beyond the tree line when everyone else saw only shadows. Once, during a crowded farmer's market, he had quietly asked 2 arguing men to stop shouting, and both had fallen silent before seeming confused by their own reaction. Claire had told herself he was observant, sensitive. Perhaps his wolf was simply stronger than hers had ever been. But every year, denying the resemblance became harder. Lucas had Ethan's silver gray eyes. He also had the same unsettling stillness when concentrating, the same habit of turning his head slightly before answering a difficult question. Claire saw Ethan in those moments and hated how clearly memory survived time. Backpack, she reminded him. Lucas groaned. It is upstairs. Which is exactly where it will remain unless you go get it. He raced toward the staircase behind the counter. Claire smiled as his footsteps disappeared overhead. Cedar Falls had become everything she once told a stranger she wanted. The herbalist who hired her had retired 3 years earlier and sold Claire the shop on generous terms. Claire now lived with Lucas in the apartment above it. Their mornings smelled of peppermint, coffee, and bread from next door. People knew her as Claire, not as the weak Omega from Raven Creek. Most importantly, Lucas knew nothing of being unwanted. On Friday nights, they watched old movies. On Saturdays, he helped at the farmer's market until boredom sent him toward the library. Their life was small. Claire loved it fiercely. Lucas returned with his backpack hanging from one shoulder. Mom, are kings real? Claire froze with one hand inside a jar of chamomile. That depends on what kind of king. Alpha kings. Her wolf stirred. Why are you asking? Lucas pulled a folded paper from his backpack. Mr. Dawson said one is coming here. Claire took the school notice. Cedar Falls Elementary would dismiss early Thursday because several streets were closing for an official royal visit. The Alpha King was scheduled to meet local pack leaders regarding unusual activity along the northern boundaries. Claire read the notice twice. She knew almost nothing about the royal family. After leaving Raven Creek, she had deliberately avoided pack politics. Royal announcements belonged to a world she wanted no part of. Does he wear a crown? Lucas asked. I have no idea. Does he live in a castle? Probably something unnecessarily large. Lucas grinned. Can we see him? You have school. Early dismissal. Claire gave him a look. Nice try. He laughed and headed for the door. Love you. Love you more. After he left, Claire remained behind the counter holding the notice. Her wolf was restless. She told herself it meant nothing. That afternoon, the restlessness grew stronger. By Wednesday evening, Claire could not concentrate long enough to finish inventory. She climbed upstairs, opened her bedroom closet, and pulled down a wooden keepsake box hidden behind winter blankets. The silver signet still rested inside. Black Wolf. Crescent moon. Beneath it lay the folded note she had stopped reading years ago. Morning changes everything. Do not look for me. Claire closed the box. 7 years, she whispered. Whatever Ethan had become, he had chosen absence. She had chosen Lucas. That should have been enough. Thursday arrived bright and cold. By noon, Main Street filled with residents waiting behind temporary barriers. Claire intended to remain inside, but Lucas appeared after early dismissal and convinced Mrs. Hale from the bakery to bring him directly to the shop. 5 minutes, Claire warned. A distant engine interrupted him. Then another. Dark vehicles turned onto Main Street in a slow procession. People straightened. Conversations faded. Claire's wolf surged awake with such force that she gripped the doorframe. No, she had not felt that presence in 7 years. The first vehicle stopped near the town square. Several men in dark formal coats stepped out. Then the rear door of the central vehicle opened. A tall man emerged wearing a black coat marked with a subtle silver wolf crest. His hair was shorter than Claire remembered. His face carried harder lines now, shaped by years she knew nothing about. But the eyes were unchanged. Silver gray. Ethan. Claire forgot the crowd. Forgot Lucas beside her. Forgot how to breathe. Around the square, wolves lowered their heads in respect. Someone near the curb whispered the name Claire had never known. Alpha King Ethan Blackwood. The world tilted beneath her. Ethan turned toward the herbal shop as though something invisible had pulled his attention across the street. His gaze passed over the windows, reached Claire, and stopped. For 7 years, Claire had believed the stranger from the storm had disappeared because she meant nothing to him. Now the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories was staring at her, as if he had just found the one person he had never expected to see again. For one suspended second, Ethan Blackwood forgot that an entire town was watching him. Claire saw it happen from across Main Street. The Alpha King who had stepped from the dark vehicle with perfect control simply stopped. His advisors continued forward before realizing he was no longer beside them. Mayor Collins was speaking, welcoming the royal delegation to Cedar Falls, but Ethan did not appear to hear a word. His silver-gray eyes remained fixed on Claire. 7 years disappeared inside that look. Claire felt the old and around her again, smelled rain and wood smoke, remembered his hand closing gently around hers. Then she remembered the empty room, the ring, the note. Morning changes everything. Do not look for me. Her wolf surged toward him while every human instinct told her to step back. Mom? Lucas asked. Claire realized she was gripping the doorframe. She released it immediately. Go inside, sweetheart. But you said 5 minutes. I changed my mind. Lucas looked across the street at Ethan, then back at her. His expression sharpened with the same quiet attention that had unsettled Claire since he was little. You know him. It was not a question. Claire swallowed. Inside Lucas. He hesitated but obeyed, disappearing behind the shop door. Claire followed and reached for the handle, but before she could close it, a voice crossed the distance behind her. Claire. Her hand froze. Nobody had said her name that way in 7 years. She turned slowly. Ethan was approaching alone, although several royal guards remained within sight near the square. People moved aside without being asked. His authority seemed to travel ahead of him, silent and effortless. Claire hated that part of her still remembered the man beneath it. He stopped several feet from the doorway. Up close, time was impossible to ignore. There were faint lines beside his eyes now. His shoulders carried more weight than she remembered. Yet beneath the black royal coat and silver crest, she could still see the stranger who had admitted he wanted a cabin beside a lake. It is you, he said quietly. Claire forced herself to stand straight. Your Majesty. Something tightened in his expression. Do not call me that. Why not? Apparently everyone else does. Ethan looked toward the lowered heads around the square, then back at her. You never did. I did not know I was supposed to. The words landed between them. Ethan absorbed them without defense. I should have told you. Claire almost laughed. Which part? Your last name? Your title? Or the part where strangers bow when you walk past? All of it. 7 years late. His breath changed. Claire, I can explain. There is nothing to explain. There is more than you know. She felt anger rise, not hot or wild, but old, carefully preserved. I know enough. I woke up alone. You left a note. You told me not to. Look for you. Ethan's face became completely still. What note? Claire stared at him. Do not. What note? He repeated, and there was something in his voice she had not expected. Confusion. Genuine confusion. The note beside your ring. Ethan took half a step closer, then stopped himself. I never left you a note. Claire felt the street tilt beneath her again. I read it. Then someone else wrote it. Why would anyone do that? Ethan opened his mouth, but the shop bell chimed behind Claire. Lucas stepped outside with his backpack still hanging from one shoulder. Mom, Mrs. Hale wants to know if we are still getting lunch. Claire turned too quickly. Lucas, I asked you to stay inside. I was inside. He looked at Ethan. Ethan looked back. The change in him was immediate. His entire body went still. Claire had spent 7 years seeing traces of Ethan in her son, but she had never been forced to see the resemblance from the other direction. Lucas had dark hair, fair skin, and those unmistakable silver-gray eyes. Ethan's gaze moved over the boy's face as though every missing year had suddenly taken human form. Lucas stepped closer to Claire, sensing the tension. Who is he? Claire could not answer. Ethan's eyes lifted to hers. She saw the question forming before he spoke it, and fear tightened around her heart. Not fear of him. Fear of everything that would change once the truth existed outside her own memory. Ethan looked back at Lucas. His controlled royal expression had vanished. What is your name? He asked gently. Lucas studied him. Lucas Bennett. Ethan repeated it almost silently. Lucas. The boy frowned. Do I know you? Ethan's gaze returned to Claire, and she saw something deeper than suspicion now. Recognition. His wolf had noticed what his mind was still afraid to believe. Claire could feel that power beneath his restraint, responding to Lucas with the same impossible certainty her own wolf had once responded to Ethan. Lucas moved protectively in front of her. You are making my mom nervous. Ethan looked down at the 7-year-old boy standing between them. Then his eyes returned to Claire, filled with a question that no forged note could keep buried anymore. Claire, he whispered, how old is he? Claire did not answer, not because she did not know what to say, but because Lucas was standing close enough to hear every word. 7 years of protecting him had taught her that truth mattered, but so did timing. Lucas, go ask Mrs. Hale to save us a table, she said gently. He looked at her, then at Ethan. Are you coming? In a minute. Lucas narrowed his silver-gray eyes at Ethan with an expression so familiar that Claire's chest tightened. Okay, but only a minute. He headed toward the bakery next door, glancing back before disappearing inside. Ethan watched him through the window until Claire stepped between his line of sight and the bakery. Not here, she said. Claire, you are standing on Main Street surrounded by half the town and your entire royal delegation. Ethan looked around as though he had forgotten they existed. Then, somewhere private. Claire hesitated before unlocking the herbal shop again. Ethan followed her inside. The familiar scent of lavender and peppermint should have calmed her. It did not. She turned the sign to closed and remained behind the counter. Ethan stayed near the door, giving her distance. 7, Claire said. The word barely rose above a whisper. Ethan did not move. He turned 7 in June. Silence filled the shop. Claire watched the calculation pass across his face. The storm. The inn. The morning he disappeared. 7 years. Is he mine? Ethan asked. There was no command in his voice. No royal authority. Only a question that seemed almost difficult for him to breathe around. Claire held his gaze. Yes. Ethan looked down. For several seconds, the Alpha King disappeared completely, leaving only a man discovering that an entire childhood had begun without him. You knew? I found out several weeks after I left the inn. Why did you never contact me? Claire stared at him. Contact who? Ethan with no last name? Ethan with no address? Ethan who left me a message saying not to look for him. I did not write that message. I believed you did. And I believed you disappeared. Claire's anger faltered. What does that mean? Ethan stepped toward the counter, then stopped. Before dawn, people from my royal guard found me. There was an emergency in the capital. I had to leave immediately. You could have woken me. Pain flickered across his expression. I tried. Claire's breath caught. What? You were exhausted. I was told I had minutes, not hours. I thought I would handle the emergency and return before you traveled far. His eyes stayed on hers. 3 days later, I came back. Claire gripped the counter. No. The room was empty. The innkeeper said you had taken the westbound highway. You came back. Yes. The certainty in that one word cracked something Claire had carried for 7 years. She remembered sitting alone in her car, the ring hidden in the glove compartment, refusing to cry because she had promised herself Ethan would not become another person whose rejection defined her. Then explain the note. I cannot. Not yet. That is convenient. Claire, I never told you to forget me. Her eyes burned. Your first words to me that night were asking me to forget your face. Ethan went still. Claire continued before courage abandoned her. Then morning came. You disappeared, and I found a note telling me not to look for you. What was I supposed to think? Ethan lowered his gaze. That first request was because I believed knowing me could put you inside a life you never asked for. The note was not mine. Claire wanted to reject the explanation. Anger was easier than uncertainty. But his confusion when she first mentioned the note had been too immediate to dismiss. The ring, she said. Was that yours? What did it look like? Silver. A black wolf beneath a crescent moon. Ethan's expression changed. My royal signet. I still have it. His eyes snapped to hers. Where? Upstairs. Ethan slowly exhaled. Claire, I would never leave that ring as a farewell token. Then why was it there? I do not know. The answer settled coldly between them. Before Claire could respond, the bakery door opened outside. Lucas emerged carrying a paper bag, walking toward the shop. Halfway across the sidewalk, he suddenly stopped. His head turned toward the intersection. Claire heard nothing unusual. Ethan did. His attention shifted at the exact same instant. A delivery truck approaching the corner gave a faint mechanical sputter, followed a heartbeat later by a sharp backfire. Several people outside startled. Lucas did not. He had heard the engine misfire first. Ethan stared through the window. Claire recognized the look on his face. It was the same look she had worn countless times when Lucas noticed footsteps before anyone arrived or heard sounds that should have been too distant. Lucas opened the shop door. Mom, Mrs. Hale gave us cinnamon rolls. He noticed Ethan still standing there. You are still talking? Apparently, Claire said. Lucas held the bag toward Ethan. Do kings eat cinnamon rolls? Ethan blinked. When they are fortunate. Lucas considered that answer and offered him one. Ethan accepted it as carefully as though the boy had handed him something priceless. Their fingers briefly touched. Ethan froze. Lucas did too. A strange stillness moved through the room. Claire's wolf lifted its head. Ethan slowly looked down at the child. Something deeper than resemblance had answered that contact. Something instinctive. Ancient. Lucas pulled his hand back and frowned. That felt weird. Ethan's silver-gray eyes lifted to Claire's. Whatever doubt remained in them was disappearing. Then Lucas glanced toward the rear of the shop before anyone made a sound. Someone is coming, he said. 3 seconds later, footsteps reached the back door. The footsteps stopped directly outside the rear door. Claire instinctively moved closer to Lucas, but Ethan lifted one hand, calm rather than alarmed. It is one of mine, he said. A firm knock followed. Your Majesty, Daniel Mercer. The area is secure. Ethan opened the door. A broad-shouldered man in a dark royal coat stood outside, his posture formal but familiar enough to suggest years of trust. Mayor Collins is waiting for the boundary briefing, Daniel said. There have been 3 additional reports from the northern ridge. Ethan glanced toward Claire and Lucas. Move the briefing back 30 minutes. Daniel hesitated. The council is already assembled. Then they have 30 minutes to enjoy Cedar Falls. Coffee. Claire almost smiled. Daniel apparently knew better than to argue. Yes, Your Majesty. His attention shifted briefly toward Lucas. The moment their eyes met, something strange happened. Daniel's shoulders became rigid. His gaze lowered almost automatically before he seemed to realize what he had done. Lucas noticed too. Why did he look down, he asked. Daniel looked at Ethan. Ethan's expression sharpened with thought. Habit, Daniel answered carefully. Lucas frowned. You do not know me. No, Daniel said. I do not. He left through the rear entrance, closing the door quietly behind him. Claire turned to Ethan. That was not normal. No. You know why he did it. I have a theory. Claire folded her arms. I'm getting tired of theories. Ethan looked toward Lucas, who had climbed onto a stool and was examining his cinnamon roll as if royal mysteries ranked below frosting on his list of priorities. Lucas, Ethan said, does that happen often? Does what happen? People becoming quiet when you speak. Lucas shrugged. Sometimes. Claire's stomach tightened. He is 7. I know. Then stop looking at him like he is some royal puzzle. Ethan immediately softened. You are right. The apology surprised her. He crouched several feet from Lucas rather than approaching without permission. I am sorry. There are things about you that remind me of my family, and I am trying to understand them. Lucas chewed thoughtfully. Because you are my dad. Claire forgot how to breathe. Ethan went perfectly still. Lucas, she said softly. Her son looked at her. I heard you talking. Of course he had. Enhanced hearing. Claire should have remembered. Are you mad? Lucas asked. No. Is he? Ethan answered before Claire could. No. Lucas looked directly at him. So you are. Ethan glanced at Claire, silently giving her the choice to stop the conversation. She could have postponed it. Maybe she should have. But Lucas had spent his whole life trusting that she would tell him the truth when it mattered. Claire moved beside him and rested a hand on his shoulder. Yes, sweetheart. Ethan is your father. Lucas stared at Ethan for several seconds. There were no tears, no immediate joy, only the serious concentration Claire recognized from difficult homework. Did you know about me? Not until today, Ethan said. Why? The question landed harder than accusation. Ethan lowered himself until he was level with Lucas. Because I lost your mother before I knew she was expecting you. She was not lost. She was here. Ethan's expression changed. You are right. I did not know where here was. Lucas considered that. Did you look? Claire felt her heart tighten. Ethan did not look away. Yes. For how long? A long time. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Every answer was rearranging 7 years of certainty. Lucas glanced at her. Mom thought you left. I know. Did you? I had to leave that morning. But I came back. Lucas frowned. Then somebody messed everything up. The simplicity of the statement almost broke through Claire's fear. It seems that way, Ethan said. Lucas took another bite of his cinnamon roll. That was not very smart. Ethan's mouth twitched. No, it was not. A sudden burst of voices rose outside the front window. Several townspeople were being redirected away from the intersection, while royal personnel repositioned barriers for the arriving council members. Nothing dangerous was happening, but the unexpected movement crowded the sidewalk. Claire stepped toward the window. Lucas followed. Someone outside opened the shop door at the same moment another person tried to pass behind Claire, and Lucas suddenly lost sight of her between several adults. Mom. His voice changed. Claire turned immediately. I am here. But Lucas had already panicked. His silver-gray eyes fixed on the people between them. Stop. The word was not loud. It did not need to be. The room became unnaturally still. Every wolf near the doorway froze mid-motion. Even Daniel, who had returned from the alley, stopped with one hand near the doorframe. Claire felt pressure move through the air, not painful, but undeniable, like the weight before a storm. Her own wolf lowered its head instinctively. Ethan did not move. His face had gone pale. Lucas slipped between the motionless adults and reached Claire, grabbing her hand. The pressure vanished instantly. People blinked and began moving again, confused by the strange pause. Lucas looked up at Claire. What happened? She had no answer. Ethan slowly approached, wonder and disbelief replacing every trace of royal composure. He looked at Lucas, then at Daniel. Daniel's expression confirmed whatever Ethan had just realized. Your Majesty, Daniel whispered. Ethan shook his head once, unable to take his eyes from the boy. Claire tightened her hand around Lucas's. Tell me. Ethan finally looked at her. His voice was barely audible. That was not enhanced hearing. He lowered himself in front of Lucas, keeping a respectful distance. That was an alpha command. Lucas stared at Ethan as if the words belonged to a language he had never heard. What is an alpha command? He asked. Claire kept one hand around her son's fingers. The strange pressure had vanished, but her wolf remained alert, unsettled by the memory of instinctively lowering its head to a 7-year-old child. Ethan stayed crouched at Lucas's level. It is a form of authority some alpha wolves develop, he explained carefully. When they speak with enough intent, other wolves feel compelled to listen. Lucas glanced toward the doorway, where Daniel and several others were quietly giving them space. I did not mean to make everybody stop. I know. Am I in trouble? Claire immediately knelt beside him. Absolutely not. Ethan nodded. Your mother is right. You did nothing wrong. Lucas looked between them. Then why does everyone look worried? Claire wished she could answer. Ethan did. Because you did something most wolves cannot do until they are much older. Can you do it? Ethan's expression softened. Yes. Did I get it from you? Silence settled over the shop. Claire felt Lucas's small hand tighten around hers. Ethan looked at her before answering, still allowing her to control how much truth entered their son's world. Claire gave a slight nod. Probably, Ethan said. Lucas thought about that with the seriousness he usually reserved for science projects. So it is like getting mom's brown hair? Claire almost laughed from nerves. Something like that. Ethan's mouth curved. Faintly, except considerably louder. Lucas looked pleased by this comparison until Claire squeezed his hand. That does not mean you practice it on people. I know. Daniel stepped forward cautiously. Your Majesty, may I say something? Ethan rose. Go ahead. Daniel's gaze remained on Lucas. I have served royal alphas for 23 years. I have never felt a command that strong from a child. Claire's protective instincts sharpened. He is not an experiment. Daniel immediately lowered his head. I did not mean to suggest that, Miss Bennet. Ethan's voice remained calm. Nobody tests him. Nobody examines him. Nobody even discusses his abilities outside this room, without Claire's permission. Claire looked at him. There was no hesitation in the order. The Alpha King could have claimed authority through blood, title, or tradition. Instead, he had placed the decision with her. Something inside Claire loosened despite herself. Lucas tugged gently at her sleeve. Mom, my wrist feels warm. Claire looked down. Which wrist? He raised his left arm. A pale crescent-shaped mark curved along the inside of it. Something Claire had seen since his infancy and always assumed was an unusual birthmark. Now the skin around it carried the faintest silver glow. Ethan's expression changed instantly. How long has he had that? Since he was born. Claire, may I look? She hesitated, then nodded. Ethan approached slowly. Lucas, is that all right with you? Lucas extended his arm. It does not hurt. Ethan did not touch him at first. He studied the crescent from several inches away. The silver glow strengthened. Thin lines appeared around the mark, delicate as moonlight traced beneath the skin. Daniel inhaled sharply. That cannot be. Claire looked at him. What cannot be? Ethan's eyes never left the mark. Daniel. The warning was quiet. She deserves to know, Daniel said. Ethan finally nodded. Royal children used to receive protective seals generations ago, he explained. They were designed to limit certain inherited abilities until the child was old enough to control them. Claire stared at Lucas's wrist. Used to. The practice ended long before I was born. Then this cannot be one. Ethan's silence answered before he did. It looks exactly like one. Claire's stomach tightened. You said children receive them. Who placed them? Royal guardians. Sometimes senior members of the household. Lucas looked at the glowing crescent. So somebody put this on me. Claire wrapped an arm around his shoulders. We do not know that yet. Ethan's face had become unreadable. No, we do know one thing. Claire met his eyes. What? These seals do not appear naturally through inheritance. The room suddenly felt colder. Claire remembered the hospital, the nurses moving quietly around her newborn son, the exhaustion that had made hours blur together. She remembered being alone except for people she had trusted because she had no reason not to. Someone had access to him, she whispered. Ethan nodded. Lucas leaned against her side. Why would somebody want to lock my wolf? Claire kissed the top of his head. We are going to find out. Ethan watched them, and for the first time since arriving in Cedar Falls, Claire saw something stronger than shock in his eyes. Purpose. There is something else, he said. A royal seal requires royal authority to activate. Claire's heartbeat stumbled. What are you saying? Ethan looked at the crescent again. The silver lines were already fading. Whoever placed this on Lucas did not merely know he was different. His gaze rose to Claire's. They knew exactly whose son he was. Claire heard the words, but her mind refused to accept them. Someone had known. Not guessed. Not suspected. Known. She looked down at Lucas, who was studying the fading crescent on his wrist with more curiosity than fear. That innocence steadied her. Whatever mystery surrounded his birth, he was still the boy who forgot his backpack twice a week and believed cinnamon rolls counted as breakfast. Lucas, Claire said gently, would you go upstairs for a few minutes? He looked immediately suspicious. Why? Because Ethan and I need to talk about something from before you were born. Is it about me? Claire refused to lie. Partly. Lucas considered this, then looked at Ethan. Are you staying? Ethan nodded. If your mother allows me. Lucas turned back to Claire. Then I will be upstairs. He took 3 steps before stopping. Do not make decisions about me without telling me. Ethan's eyebrows lifted slightly. Claire almost smiled. Deal. Lucas disappeared up the staircase. When his bedroom door closed, Claire turned toward Ethan. The ring and the note are upstairs. Ethan's expression sharpened. Bring them down. Claire climbed the stairs and entered her bedroom. The wooden keepsake box waited behind the winter blankets exactly where she had left it. For 7 years, she had treated it like a grave for a memory she refused to bury completely. She carried it downstairs and placed it on the counter. Ethan stood opposite her. Daniel remained near the rear door, but Ethan quietly asked him to give them privacy. Once they were alone, Claire opened the box. The silver signet caught the afternoon light. Ethan stared at it. That is mine. Claire lifted the folded paper beneath it. And this? Ethan did not touch the note immediately. Read it. Her throat tightened. Morning changes everything. Do not look for me. Ethan's face went still. I never wrote those words. Claire handed him the paper. He studied the handwriting for several seconds. Then his eyes narrowed. I have seen this writing before. Claire felt cold. Whose? I cannot place it yet. He turned the note toward the light. But this was written by someone who had access to my household. How can you know that? Ethan pointed toward a tiny indentation near the bottom of the paper. Royal correspondence paper carried a pressed watermark 7 years ago. Most people would never notice it. Claire leaned closer. Beneath the fibers was the faint shape of a crescent surrounding a wolf. Her stomach tightened. So whoever wrote this had royal stationery. Yes. And your ring. Yes. Claire stared at him. Tell me exactly what happened that morning. Ethan placed the note down carefully. Before dawn, Daniel and 2 royal guards reached the inn. There had been a succession dispute among 3 northern packs, and my presence was required in the capital before the council convened. You left without waking me. Regret crossed his face. I tried. You were exhausted. I told the innkeeper I would return. Claire remembered the man's strange hesitation when she asked whether Ethan had left alone. He knew who you were. He recognized Daniel. Ethan paused. I returned 3 days later. Claire looked away. Hearing it again hurt differently now. And I was gone. Your room had been cleared. The innkeeper said you drove west. I had no last name for you. No pack I could safely contact, and no destination. His voice lowered. I searched anyway. Claire's eyes returned to him. For how long? Months. One word. 7 years of certainty cracked around it. Ethan continued. Every Claire registered through Western Pack territories was checked. Bus records. Hotels. Employment registries that were legally available to the Crown. Nothing led to you. Claire understood why. Cedar Falls had no formal pack registry for independent Omegas, and Margaret had hired her privately. She had unknowingly disappeared into the exact kind of ordinary life she had wanted. I thought you had decided that one night was enough, Ethan said. Claire swallowed. I thought you had decided I was a mistake. His eyes closed briefly. When they opened, the distance between Alpha King and Stranger seemed to vanish. Never. Claire looked at the forged note between them. For 7 years, she had been angry at a man who had returned. For 7 years, Ethan had searched for a woman who believed he had ordered her to disappear. Neither had abandoned the other. Someone had simply made sure they believed they had. The timing, Claire whispered. Ethan understood immediately. Whoever left this note knew I had been called away, and knew where you spent the night. Yes. Claire looked toward the ceiling, toward Lucas. Then years later, someone had access to my newborn son. Ethan followed her gaze. His expression changed. Claire, where was Lucas born? Cedar Falls Community Hospital. Who knew the father's identity? No one. She stopped. I never told anyone your name because I did not know it. Ethan looked down at the royal signet. You did not need to. Claire's breath caught. The ring. If someone knew you had it, they could have connected you to me. The realization moved through her like winter air. Ethan picked up the forged note again, studying the handwriting with renewed concentration. Then his face changed. Recognition. Claire saw it before he spoke. You remember. Ethan slowly raised his eyes to hers. Yes. Who wrote it? His answer came quietly. A man who worked inside my royal household 7 years ago. Claire did not ask the name immediately. She watched Ethan stare at the forged note as though 7 lost years had suddenly become something he could hold between his fingers. Outside, Cedar Falls continued with its ordinary afternoon. A delivery van rolled past the window. Someone laughed near the bakery. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked beneath Lucas's footsteps. The normal sounds made the truth feel even stranger. Who was he? Claire finally asked. Ethan placed the paper on the counter. Charles Vane. He served as an assistant to my royal secretary. Someone important? Important enough to know my schedule. Unimportant enough that people rarely noticed him. Claire looked at the handwriting again. And you are certain? I signed documents he prepared for almost 4 years. I saw his handwriting every week. Ethan's gaze hardened with concentration. He also had access to royal correspondence paper. And your signet? Not normally. Then how did he get it? Ethan turned the ring over in his palm. That is what concerns me. Claire folded her arms, fighting the cold gathering beneath her skin. Where is Charles now? He resigned less than 2 months after that night. You never wondered why. People leave royal service. At the time, there was no reason to connect his resignation to you. Ethan paused. I did not even know he knew you existed. Claire looked toward the ceiling again. But if he wrote that note, he did. Yes. And if he knew about Lucas? She could not finish. Ethan stepped closer but stopped on the other side of the counter. We do not know that Charles placed the seal, but somebody did. Yes. Claire pressed her fingertips against the wood. She remembered Lucas as a newborn, impossibly small beneath a blue hospital blanket. She remembered sleeping in short stretches, waking whenever he made the slightest sound. Nurses had entered and left. Doctors had checked him. Margaret had visited with flowers and enough food for a week. Nothing had seemed wrong. I should have noticed. Ethan's expression changed instantly. No. There was a mark on his wrist from the beginning. Claire, you believed it was a birthmark because you had no reason to believe otherwise. She looked at him. Someone got close enough to my baby to place a royal seal on him. And that responsibility belongs to whoever did it. Not you. The certainty in his voice silenced the answer forming in her throat. Ethan set the signet beside the note. I will investigate Charles quietly. I will also obtain the hospital records, but only with your permission. Claire studied him. You are asking? Lucas is your son. A shadow of pain crossed his face. And mine, apparently, but I have been his father for less than an afternoon. I have not earned the right to walk into his life and start giving orders. Claire had expected many things from the Alpha King. She had not expected restraint. He is going to have questions. So am I. He may be angry. He is allowed. He may not want you here tomorrow. Ethan was silent for a moment. Then I will give him space tomorrow and try again when he is ready. Claire's defenses shifted, not falling, but losing some of their certainty. Footsteps came down the stairs. Lucas appeared carrying a green hardcover book. Are you finished talking about me? Claire almost smiled. For now. Lucas walked to the counter and looked at the ring. Is that his? Yes, Claire said. I found it a long time ago. Lucas looked at Ethan. Why did Mom have your ring? Ethan glanced at Claire before answering. Because someone left it where she would find it. Was it you? No. Lucas absorbed this. So somebody wanted Mom to think you left it. Ethan nodded. That is what we believe. Lucas climbed onto his usual stool. Adults make things complicated. Claire let out a surprised laugh. Ethan smiled. That is unfortunately true. Lucas opened his book, then paused. If you are my father, does that make me a prince? Claire closed her eyes. Ethan actually laughed. Technically, there are several titles involved. Do I have to use them? No. Good. Lucas looked relieved. Can I still go to school? Of course. Can I still help Mom here? If she lets you. Can I still be Lucas Bennett? Ethan's smile faded. He looked at the boy for a long moment. Always. Something inside Claire softened. Lucas looked down at his left wrist. It is warm again. Claire immediately moved beside him. The crescent mark was beginning to glow. Ethan crouched several feet away. May I? Lucas nodded and extended his arm. Ethan brought his hand close without touching. Silver lines spread gently around the crescent. Then another shape appeared beneath them, faint at first, like ink rising through water. A black wolf surrounded by a thin silver circle. Ethan stopped breathing for a heartbeat. Claire recognized the symbol immediately. She looked at the signet on the counter. The same wolf. The same crescent. Your crest, she whispered. Ethan nodded. My bloodline. Lucas stared at the mark. Why is it showing now? Ethan slowly withdrew his hand. The symbol remained. Because the seal recognizes royal blood. Claire felt her pulse quicken. Then your presence is weakening it. Possibly. Ethan's eyes stayed on the mark. Or it was designed to respond when I came near him. Lucas looked between them. Why would somebody do that? Neither adult answered. Claire looked at the forged note, then at the royal signet, then at the mysterious seal on her son's wrist. For 7 years, she had believed the secret was that Ethan had left her. Today she learned the truth was far larger. Someone had separated them deliberately. Someone had known Lucas carried royal blood. And somewhere beyond Cedar Falls, Charles Vane might still know why. For the first time in 7 years, Claire no longer knew which memory hurt more, believing Ethan had abandoned her, or learning that he had not. The forged note rested on the counter beside the silver signet, while Lucas sat between them, studying the fading royal seal on his wrist. Outside, late afternoon sunlight turned Main Street gold, and Cedar Falls continued moving as if 3 lives had not just been rewritten inside one small herbal shop. Ethan looked toward the window where Daniel waited across the street with the royal delegation. I have to attend the boundary briefing, he said. Lucas immediately looked up. Are you leaving? The question was simple, but Claire felt it land between them. Ethan did too. He lowered himself until he was level with the boy. For a few hours. Lucas glanced at Claire before asking, Are you coming back? Ethan became very still. 7 years earlier, Claire had fallen asleep without asking him that same question because she had been afraid of the answer. Now their son asked it without hesitation. Yes, Ethan said. And this time, you will know where I am going and when I plan to return. Lucas considered the promise. What if the meeting takes longer? Then I will call. Mom says people should call when plans change. Ethan glanced at Claire. Your mother is right. She usually is. Claire almost laughed. Ethan smiled. Then his expression softened. Lucas, there is something else I need you to understand. Finding out that I am your father does not mean your life belongs to me. Lucas frowned slightly. Ethan continued. You do not have to call me father. You do not have to leave Cedar Falls. You do not have to become someone different because of my title. Lucas looked at him with those unmistakable silver-gray eyes. Then what do I have to do? Ethan's voice grew quieter. Nothing. I am the one who has work to do. Claire felt her throat tighten. What kind of work? Lucas asked. Ethan held his gaze. I have 7 years to learn about. Lucas thought about that. That is a lot. It is. My favorite color is green. Ethan blinked. Green. I hate peas. Important information. I like astronomy, cinnamon rolls, and mystery books. I lost my first tooth when I was 5, and Mom stayed awake because I thought the tooth fairy might forget our apartment. Ethan's eyes briefly closed. When they opened, emotion had broken through the careful control Claire remembered so well. I wish I had known. Lucas tilted his head. You know now? For words. Nothing more. Yet Claire watched the Alpha King absorb them like a gift. Ethan slowly offered his hand, then stopped before reaching Lucas. May I? Lucas looked at Claire. She nodded. The boy placed his small hand in Ethan's. The crescent on his wrist immediately shimmered silver, but this time nobody pulled away. Ethan stared at their joined hands. I cannot give you back the years I missed, he said. But if you let me, I would like to earn the ones ahead. Lucas studied him for a long moment. You can start with dinner. Ethan looked surprised. Dinner? Mrs. Hale makes pot roast on Thursdays. Claire laughed softly. Apparently royal reconciliation comes with mashed potatoes. Ethan stood, still holding Lucas's hand until the boy released it naturally. Then his gaze found Claire. Everything between them became quieter. I owe you more than an explanation. Claire shook her head. Do not promise me 7 years in one afternoon. Ethan absorbed that. Then I will promise tomorrow. Claire remembered the stranger beside the fireplace. The man who had asked for one night without a name. Tomorrow is enough. For the first time, she meant it. Ethan reached the door, but Claire stopped him. Charles Vane. He turned. Find the truth before you decide what it means. I will. And Lucas stays out of royal politics. Agreed. No announcements about him. None. No titles. Ethan glanced at Lucas. I suspect he would refuse them anyway. Correct, Lucas called from the counter. Ethan smiled. He opened the door, then paused beneath the little brass bell. Claire. She looked at him. I did come back. Her chest tightened, but this time she did not look away. I believe you. The words seemed to release something both of them had carried for years. Ethan stepped onto Main Street. Lucas moved beside Claire and slipped his hand into hers. Together, they watched the Alpha King cross toward his waiting delegation. Halfway across the street, Ethan turned. Lucas raised one hand. After a heartbeat, Ethan raised his in return. Then warmth suddenly spread through Lucas's fingers. "Mom." Claire looked down. The crescent seal was glowing again. Beneath the silver lines, the black wolf crest appeared, but another detail was emerging around it. A narrow ring of tiny symbols Claire had never noticed before. Ethan saw the light from across the street and immediately returned. He stopped beside them, staring at the symbols. "Can you read them?" Claire asked. Ethan's expression changed. "Yes." Lucas held his wrist closer. "What do they say?" Ethan translated slowly. "Hidden until the king returns." Silence fell. Claire looked from the seal to Ethan. Whoever had placed it on Lucas had not intended to erase his royal blood forever. They had expected Ethan to find him someday. Ethan's eyes lifted toward the distant northern mountains, where the investigation that brought him to Cedar Falls had begun. Suddenly, his arrival no longer felt accidental. Claire tightened her hand around Lucas's. 7 years ago, someone had stolen their chance to become a family. Today, that family stood together for the first time, not because fate had repaired the past, but because truth had finally opened a door the lie could no longer keep closed. Somewhere beyond Cedar Falls, Charles Vane might still hold the answer to why Lucas had been hidden. But Claire was no longer facing that mystery alone. Thank you for watching and staying with Claire, Ethan, and Lucas through their journey. Tell us in the comments what you believe Charles Vane was really trying to hide. And if this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel and help us bring you more unforgettable stories.